We're here in beautiful Sun Moon Lake under this mother tree to talk about this month's tea, Ruby Red, Taiwan 18. Ruby Red is one of the most unique teas in the entire world. As most of you have no doubt realized, it tastes unlike any other tea in the world. It has this kind of cinnamon, wintergreen, peppermint flavor that sets it apart from all other red teas that I've ever tried. It has a really unique story as well. The history of tea in Sun Moon Lake is very different than other places because it involves various governments and historical elements that bring a kind of fate to this place, and also nature herself. Japan controlled Taiwan for several decades prior to World War II, and during that time they were looking to use agriculture here to boost their empire, and tea played a large role in that. And cooperating with Taiwanese tea farmers, they traveled to India and Myanmar and brought large leaf tea seeds to Taiwan. And they were looking all around Taiwan for areas that they felt suited these seeds, that were very similar to the homes where the seeds had come from in India and Myanmar. And they found Sun Moon Lake, which was neither too high nor too low. It was a perfect altitude, a lot of rain and humidity like most places in Taiwan, and very suitable for growing large leaf tea. The first man to bring back those seeds from Myanmar planted a garden here in Sun Moon Lake, which he called the Zen Garden. And the trees thrived, and the red tea industry was booming for a while under the Japanese rule. Then when the Taiwanese ousted the Japanese, the tea farms here, the plantations, were abandoned and left to go wild. And for about 50 to 80 years, nobody tended them, and they just propagated themselves. And so there's all kinds of wild tea trees spread all across Sun Moon Lake. So Elevation, which is the only tea that we share every year in Global Tea Hut, comes from those wild tea trees that were brought here by the Japanese, planted and then abandoned for many decades and then recultivated. The Japanese founded a research association which continued on even after they left and continues to thrive today and has many branches. And so there was a main branch located here in Sun Moon Lake to develop the red tea industry that they founded when they brought those seeds from Myanmar and India over here to be planted in this place. They were all large leaf, but they started creating cultivars. And the main impetus for creating cultivars was to create strands of tea that would increase yield and be more pest resistant. Because of course in those glorious days there was no agrochemicals. So over many, many decades, the research organization here in Sun Moon Lake created and developed many, many cultivars. And they were all just known as numbers. Originally, Ruby Red had a number that was something, 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 058. And so it was known to farmers as 58. It became Taiwan 18 for a while after 58, and then in 2003 became known in the mainstream as Ruby Red. But it's just a really, really special tea because you can imagine a research institute that's working in terms of decades. So they're developing cultivars over decades. This isn't a process that happens even in terms of years. You have to think decades ahead. And most of that is to do, of course, with industry, with their livelihood, with increasing yield and increasing pest resistance. And then along comes this magical cultivar that tastes unlike anything they had ever experienced. And immediately they knew they were onto something and began exploring it. It was almost like nature's gift exploding in a full blossom of flavor. Now, of course, as usual, we have to correct the mistake that in the West, red tea is often called black tea. Now, ordinarily, what you call something isn't really an issue. A rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. And calling red tea black tea is not really an issue. However, in this case, there is a whole other genre of tea called black tea. So if you call red tea black tea, then what do you call black tea? And furthermore, if you're going to explore tea, especially in China or Taiwan, and you come and ask for black tea, you're going to get something different than what you want, which is red tea. Now, if your relationship to tea is casual, if your grandmother serves me a cup of tea with a tea bag and says, "Have some black tea, honey," I'm not going to correct her. I would let her continue to call that black tea, and I would say, "Thank you for the black tea." But if you want to explore tea and get to know the 7 genres of tea, then help us to correct this century-old mistake, which basically began because Europeans were actually not allowed more than 100 paces from the dock. So they never saw tea trees, and other than some roasting that was happening in dock merchants' shops, they didn't really see tea processing either. And in those early days, they actually called all oolong black tea and red tea black tea. So they really were one thing. You know, maybe oolong was called black tea to them because it means black dragon. Some people say that as the tea sat in the ships for many months on its way to Europe, it oxidized more. In a lot of Western tea literature, websites and books, you'll encounter some misleading information that says that all tea is Camellia sinensis and that the differences are in the processing. Well, in the first place, recently, the breadth and scope of what is tea has expanded so much in Yunnan, and there are new wild trees that are being discovered that scientists have found to be so unique that they've actually said they're a different species. They're not Camellia sinensis, they're Camellia thailandensis and other things like this. Traditionally, the genres of tea, the kinds of tea, are defined as much by the tree, by the varietal, as they are by the processing. Because the processing methods developed hand to glove to suit particular local varieties. Over many, many generations, over decades and decades, centuries sometimes, farmers attuned their processing to bring out the best in the local varietals and cultivars that were near to them. So they were processing the tea and changing and evolving their processing to suit a very particular varietal of tea. And that evolution, that progress of tea processing happened through trial and error. It happened through insight. It happened through spiritual connection and dialogue with the trees around them. So through all these means, the processing methods evolved over time to suit the varietal that was there local to them, right? And so you can take tea from another region and you can process it like a different region, but it will never be exactly the right thing, and real tea lovers will be able to tell the difference. So you can process tea like white tea, but if it doesn't have white buds, how is it white tea? It's not white tea from Fuding. I will know that it's not from Fuding, that it's from Taiwan. And these experiments and innovations, which are mostly born out of a desire to create some kind of economic niche, they rarely result in something really, really fine. More often than not, it's just a gimmick. The best processing evolved over time to suit particular kinds of tree. So the genres of tea, they're kinds of tea trees and they're kinds of processing both, except for one genre of tea. There's only one genre of tea that is not a tree and a processing technique, and that's red tea, which, by the way, is the most consumed tea in the West, known as black tea, of course, in the West. And so you could see how this confusion of promulgating the idea that all tea is Camellia sinensis and the differences in the processing would arise in the West, since that is only true of red tea, and red tea is the most consumed tea in the West. In other words, what I'm saying is that you can process any tea like red tea, and usually it will turn out fine. If you take Qingxing oolong trees that are even very high altitude and process them like red tea, I've had such tea, it can be good. And Yunnanese pu'er, you get awesome dianhong, and so you can process almost any varietal like red tea. Now, just because all tea can be processed like a red tea doesn't mean there aren't varietals and cultivars that are very, very much suited to be red tea. They were born to be red tea. There are, like Ruby Red, this month's tea, which was born to be a red tea. It was literally made to be a red tea because it's a man-made cultivar. The farmer here in Sun Moon Lake is one of my dear friends, one of the greatest tea farmers I've ever met. When you go down the street that he lives on, you can see mansions of tea farmers, big houses of tea farmers that have created inorganic plantations and made a lot of money. And you get to this last simple house, which is his, which says a lot. It's really easy to maintain values when an environment is conducive to that, but to keep your integrity when there is a temptation not to, a financial temptation not to, says a lot about the integrity of this person. He's an amazing man, and he loves the earth, he loves his land, and he's a real wholesome proponent for organic tea. And just today, we made a pact with this special farmer that we'd like to share with you because it involves all of you guys. I promised him that every year at Chinese New Year, whatever tea he has left unsold, our center will buy, and we'll either send it in Global Tea Hut, or we'll create some kind of exchange program where we can all get some, or we'll just store it in the center to share with guests. So we wanted you to know that this month's Ruby Red is supporting a really excellent, amazing farmer, and that it's also going to eventually lead towards a very powerful relationship in which our center and Global Tea Hut changes an organic farmer's life. And this is the first step of what we hope to be many. As Global Tea Hut grows, one of our main goals is to take steps like these. We want to use our growing influence to make a greater and greater environmental impact in the tea world and do things like this, like promise farmers that we'll buy what's left of their tea so they don't ever have to worry about whether they can sell their tea or not. And other ways and means that all of us tea lovers around the world can participate in helping promote organic, sustainable, environmentally friendly tea farming itself as a philosophy, but also improve the lives of individual farmers that are farming with such integrity. That's amazing. And in that way, truly, love is changing the world, bowl by bowl.
像我要自己管理茶园，没有那个时间上网，去怎么我们那个我们没办法了。我们就只有茶园管理可以做，销售我们就没办法。
对。
这比较差了嘛。
对。
如果有像我们你们我有多少茶叶，你们都帮我收购的话，我们就无后顾之忧，我就可以认真的管理我的茶园。我不用担心我的这个茶叶销售的问题啊。
对啊。
那个感觉上哈，我感觉上就这样子。
比较踏实了。
会比较有会更用心的去管理。
对，这是我要。
对，我不用担心我的茶叶销路的问题啊。会更用心的。
对对。